Justin Page, and for my oral presentation, I will be doing the use of child soldiers in the world. First, before we dig in deeper and see what countries use child soldiers, I think it'd be nice to determine what exactly is a child soldier and what does the world classify it as. Well, the world classifies a child soldier as an individual under the age of 18. So what happens is an individual under 18 is recruited by either a state or a non-state group to do various acts for them. These acts can range anywhere from fighting, as you can see here in the picture. There's actually a child armed with a weapon. They could do simple tasks such as cooking, which normally isn't as likely, or people use them as suicide bombers. They even use them as human shields. Pretty much any task that adults don't want to do is typically what they use child soldiers for. Once you understand what a child soldier is, the first question that usually comes to mind is, why do people use child soldiers? There's a few reasons why they use child soldiers. The first reason is they're easy to manipulate. So if you have a cause that not many people are willing to fight for, it's hard to round up people and get a bunch of soldiers. Where children typically are easy to talk to, easy to manipulate, to use towards your plans. Children are also very vulnerable because many times they don't have a mother or father. So in order to survive, they'll often go with these people and do whatever they ask. To go with that, these next two, children are often uneducated and poor. So with their education, when a child isn't educated and doesn't know how to do things, they're willing to follow somebody who is educated because they can manipulate them. Plus, if they're poor and are struggling for survival, to eat, don't have a place to sleep, people can take advantage of that and provide them food, fight for them, or to use them for various activities. Use of child soldiers is historically not something very new, as many people have used child soldiers throughout history. As far back as the Greeks, child soldiers have been used because in ancient Sparta, at the age of 7, they would start training their kids to be able to fight in military battles. Vice versa, throughout history, we can see instances where child soldiers are used. Even the US has used them. For example, in the Civil War, oftentimes many child soldiers were used for either drummer boys, or they were used to fight as well because many people from the South would enlist as families, and oftentimes whoever could carry a gun would go into war. Even during World War I and II, Germany, Russia would both use child soldiers, and then even the Vietnam War, child soldiers were still used as well by the Viet Cong. Even more recently, in the Iran-Iraq War, children were used, and what Iraq did is they would take children and they'd have them go ahead and walk minefields before the adults would walk through. That way, if there were mines, they would blow up the children instead of blowing up the actual soldiers themselves. So it's been very prevalent throughout history, and we can see the prevalency of it today. As we could see from the previous slide, this problem with child soldiers hasn't just been a modern day crime, but from this side you can see that it is still a problem today. When you look at this slide here, the country chart here shows the countries in red that are confirmed to still have child soldiers, and the countries in orange are ones that may possibly have them, but they cannot confirm it. So even though it's not as prevalent as it used to be, it still is an issue. The United States, of course, does not participate with child soldiers anymore, but we have in the past. So we still have some work to do as far as abolishing it, as you can see from this picture here. This list I pulled is the biggest offenders of having child soldiers in their countries. As you can see, a lot of these countries are either in Africa or the Middle East. The top country, and historically, has always been struggling with child soldiers because they're often in many civil wars. It's estimated there's only 350,000 child soldiers that fight for them there. And the issue with this list is that over time, these countries are typically have been the biggest offenders, even though people like the US, Great Britain have used child soldiers. These are the countries that have always used them and are continuing to use them as well. While it may look like there hasn't much to be done to help eliminate child soldiers, there actually has been 2 treaties that were signed by a lot of countries to take steps in the right direction to abolish child soldiers. The first of which was the Convention on the Rights of Children. And pretty much what this said is it was a war crime to enlist any child under the age of 18 to fight for you. This conventional treaty had a lot of support behind it, as every member of the UN nation signed it, including the United States. However, the United States did not ratify this because it had some fine print details that the US didn't fully agree with, such as the United States permit and has permitted that juveniles can be sentenced to prison for life and executed, while this is strictly against the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The next one is the Statute of the International Criminal Court. Pretty much what this was is it established the same thing, but 15 years old instead of 18-year-old. Yet again, had 139 signatures from it, mostly members of the International Criminal Court, but the United States did not ratify it. And a big reason why they didn't ratify it is because the United States isn't a member of the International Criminal Court. They can't be justified if they committed this crime and don't like to be accountable of. Even though there are treaties out there that many people signed and ratified, there still is an issue with as far as eliminate child soldiers. The couple issues there are is, one, like we talked about a lot this semester, is that there's no world government to enforce these rules if somebody were to break them. So if one of the members who signed these treaties happened to enlist a child that was under the age of 15, there's not a whole lot that the United Nations could do or the International Criminal Court could do, because they have no army to send out to punish the people who commit these crimes. The second issue is the people who don't sign the treaty, you can't really tell them what to do considering they didn't agree to anything, thus not eliminating the problem of child soldiers. The use of child soldiers is still very prevalent today, and the best example I can think of this is back in 2012 on Facebook. There was this big epidemic of this guy named Kony. Well, this guy named Kony recruits child soldiers and uses them to fight. And I can remember people sharing all these posts to stop Kony 2012, stuff like that. Well, the thing is with Joseph Kony, he's a leader of what's called the Lord's Resistance Army. And in this army, it's estimated he abducted about 60,000 kids. There's about 66,000 soldiers that he used in his army. But it's not just his army that uses child soldiers, as it is estimated there's over 300,000 child soldiers being used in the world today in current conflicts, and nearly 500,000 more that aren't part of a war going on. So, as you can see, there still is a long way to go as far as eliminating